Hello everybody, welcome back to another edition of Homemade, and today you all we are making smothered green beans. Yes, these are not your typical pour out the can, sit on the stove green beans. These green beans are really flavorful, and they are so easy to make, you all. I love doing my green beans this way. So again, we are using fresh green beans. I use canned green beans sometimes, but I would prefer to do the fresh ones. They just give you a better flavor. Now, since we are using the fresh green beans, we do have to do a few things to get these ready, meaning we have to actually cut the tips of them off, cut them up into the sizes that we want, and we have to pre-wash these. So the way that I like to do mine is I just take a regular knife, I take my colander, and I always have a bowl to catch the tips. And I just like to cut the tips of them off, and then I'll just cut my bean in half. So it'll kind of give me about that length. Now, if you want to leave your beans longer or you want to leave them whole, that is totally fine. But I'm pretty okay with just cutting them in half. If you want to cut them down a little smaller, that's even fine. But we're going to go ahead, cut our entire bag, and then I'm going to show you how I wash these. Now, I wash these, and I do use my green wash for these, and it gets them, really clean. Finish cutting these up, and we'll go to the sink and start washing them. We're back, and I've cut up my beans into the pieces, and you can see they're not really large, but they're not really small either. And I'm just going to take my wash and just sprinkle it throughout my beans. And if you notice, I do still have my beans inside the colander. I'm not going to sit them directly in the sink. I am going to wash them in the colander, and I wash them with really warm water. And I just kind of like to get them wet a little bit and move them around. Now, of course, the beans aren't as gritty as the greens typically are, but that wash is still good, you all, to use on any of your fruits and vegetables. And I just like to, really just make sure everything is off of them. And you can feel when they actually start to come clean. And I just like to move them around, but be careful. You don't want to be too rough because you don't want to break your beans up into very small pieces. We are about to start preparing our beans. Now we're going to go ahead and melt 5 tablespoons of real butter. And while that is melting down, we are going to go ahead and add in 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. And while our garlic and our butter is coming together, we are going to add in our onions. And here I just have a purple onion that I chopped up, and the pieces don't have to be so small. And we're just going to stir those around while that butter is melting. Make sure we break up our onions. Once we put in our beans, we are going to put in our seasonings, and we're going to add in our chicken broth. We're going to cover those beans, and we are going to reduce our heat and let them cook. So I'm going to go ahead, put in my beans. And I'm about to put in my seasoning. So, in my seasonings, you all, this is 1/4 cup of sugar. Yes, I do put sugar in this. I have 1 tablespoon of Creole, 1 tablespoon of paprika, a tablespoon of onion powder, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder. And I also have 1/8 of a teaspoon of celery salt. And I just like for my beans to be really seasoned, not salty, seasoned. So we're going to give that a quick stir because we want all of our beans to have that seasoning on them. And the good thing about this, you all, again, our beans are really seasoned, but they're not salty. We're not using a lot of salt in this recipe. So we'll still get the flavor. It just won't be so salty. Now we are going to add in our chicken broth. And I like to add my chicken broth around the edges, not so much in the middle because I want to kind of keep all my seasonings on there. And this chicken broth, you all, it is just 3/4 cups of chicken broth. Give them a little stir. Make sure our outside beans are seasoned. Okay. Now I'm going to put my lid on here and I'm going to reduce my heat to low to medium heat. And we're going to let these cook even before we come back and stir these. They are going to cook with the lid on for about 20 minutes. Make sure that your heat is not high because, again, we are not going to stir these. We're going to let them do their thing, but we don't want our heat to be too high to where our beans burn. We want them to kind of simmer and steam. So our beans have been cooking for about 20 minutes, and if you can see, they are done. Now, I like to let mine cook for about 5 more minutes with the lid off. If you don't want to do that, that is totally fine. But we're going to let these cook for about 5 more minutes, and we're just going to leave our lid off. We're back. Our green beans have cooled. You all, these green beans smell so good. If you've never cooked fresh green beans, if you've always just cooked them out of the can, this is the recipe that you need to try. Even if you're used to cooking them out of the can, you can still use this recipe. But I'm going to go ahead and taste these. And they are still hot. Yep. These, there is such a difference between fresh green beans and green beans out of the can. You all, these green beans, they have like a salty, sweet kind of heat going on, but they are so good. All of the spices mesh so well. When you try these green beans, make sure you leave your pictures, your comments. If you like the recipe, if you didn't like the recipe, what you didn't like, what you did like, make sure you leave that in the comment section below. And if you want to keep seeing our easy homemade recipes, make sure that you are liking, subscribing, and sharing our channel. As I always say, cooking, it's as easy or as hard as you make it. But I promise you, if you just keep it simple, be yourself, life in itself can be so much easier. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Homemade. And until next time, continue to be great.